This is Audible.
Audible Frontiers presents Deadlocked 1, written by A.R. Wise, narrated by Brian Sutherland.
Chapter 1. Infection. The apocalypse began when people were stabbed by tiny needles in crowded subways. Victims reported a stinging sensation on their thigh, as if someone in the crowd had jabbed them. They returned home to discover a swelling purple lesion where the sting had occurred. Most people didn't pay attention to it the first day, but the infection spread quickly, and soon the sick crowded ER rooms around the world. Rumors of other causes of the disease started as well. People got cut by razors taped to the handles of gas pumps. Water supplies were tainted. Cafeteria food was infected. There was a never-ending stream of new theories on how it had been spread. I assumed it was paranoia, but I was wrong. This was far worse than anyone's worst fears. The moment the paranoia turned to panic was caught on camera, but I'd been panicked all morning, not because conspiracy theorists swore the world was ending, but because mine had fallen apart around me. I planned to leave work early that day. My wife, Laura, was going to drop off our daughters at a neighbor's house and pick me up at noon. I found a lump on my left testicle a week ago, and Laura insisted I get it checked out. After a physical, the doctor said he wanted me to get an ultrasound. That test came back with concerning results, and I had to follow up with a serum tumor marker test. They got the results back from the lab yesterday, and asked me to come in as soon as possible. We knew it was bad news. If the test came back negative, they would have told us over the phone. Everyone else in the office was focused on the terrorist attacks. The burgeoning panic allowed my disease and the concern it caused a level of anonymity I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I was able to slip into the office, my face drained of color, and my palms wet with sweat, and duck into my cubicle. My best friend, a short, tubby man named Barry, had started working here around the same time as me. He sat in the cubicle next to mine and always had someone in there, usually chatting about the latest episode of a new favorite reality show or some other exercise in wasting time. He'd been written up more than once for watching shows on his computer during work. I could hear his computer now, blaring the local news. The difference today was that the sales managers were in there with him.
"What hospital are they at?"
asked Jerry. He was supposed to be managing the floor, but he had no interest in telling people to get back to work on a day like this. "St. Peter's," said Barry. "A bus full of kids just showed up." Gloria clasped her hand over her mouth. "This is horrible."
"Has anyone died?"
asked Jerry. "Not yet," said Alan, one of the company's accountants.
"How many kids are sick?"
Jerry pushed his way past the others to get a better view of Barry's screen. "They didn't say. They're taking the camera over to the bus now," said Barry. Everyone silenced, and I could hear the reporter tell viewers he was going to get on the bus. After a few moments of rustling, which I assumed was the reporter's microphone rubbing against his coat, he asked,
"What happened here? Are these kids okay?"
"Oh, my God," said Gloria. "How terrible. Look at them, the poor babies." Then the screaming started. Everyone in Barry's cubicle jumped, and the walls shook as people pressed against them. Barry's speakers crackled with the shrieks of children. My daughters are 3 and 5, so I was studied in the various screeches a child can make, and these were a mix of pain and terror. The pain screams weren't the sort that came from a stubbed toe or skinned knee. These were a violent expulsion of every ounce of breath and energy the child could muster. I can still remember the sound that came from that speaker, as if it were happening now. It was horrific. I couldn't ignore this event any longer. I got up and peered over the divider. "What are they doing?" asked Gloria. "Why are they doing that?" She was panicked and had her hands on her cheeks as if ready to cover her eyes. Barry turned off his monitor, but the sound continued to wail through his speakers. He scurried to turn them off and eventually had to rip them away from his desk. The cord whipped out from behind his computer tower. He held the speakers and stared up at me, his face drained of color and his eyes wide and unblinking. "What happened?" I asked. "I didn't see. What happened?" Jerry had his hands on his head and sounded like he was going to hyperventilate as he stumbled through the crowd and fell back against the wall outside the cubicle. James and Marcia announced they were going home, and Jerry just nodded his acceptance. The office had been tense all morning, and everyone was uncertain if they should have stayed home due to the rumors of a terrorist biochemical attack. Watching a bus filled with children devour one another was more than enough to convince everyone to clock out. Work was officially over. "What happened?" I asked again as I went out into the hall. Gloria came out of Barry's cubicle and steadied herself against the threshold.
"They were killing each other."
"What?"
"The kids—"
She couldn't continue.
"They didn't just kill each other," said Barry. "They were eating each other."
"Are you serious?"
"Yeah, Dave. I saw one bite another girl on the neck. He ripped that little girl's throat out. He fucking ate her throat, man."
Gloria said something about this being the end times, but I ignored her when I heard sirens outside. This would have been part of the normal ambiance of working in the city 10 minutes ago, but now it terrified us. I ran to the floor-to-ceiling windows that lined our third-floor office. The street below was packed with people that milled about like normal. The traffic was bad, as it always was, but no one seemed to move faster than you would expect on a normal Wednesday morning. Most of them were on cell phones, but there was nothing unusual about that. No one was acting as if there was anything wrong at all. They were still stuck in the malaise of the daily rat race that had just been shattered for us. We'd caught the first glimpse of what was to come. "What's going on?" asked Barry as he came up behind me. "Nothing from what I can tell," I said, and turned away from the window. "Are you sure you saw what you said, on that bus?" It seemed too horrific to be real. I wondered if Barry had mistaken a horror movie for reality, something filmed to mimic a real-life news broadcast. Perhaps my office had just been pranked by a War of the Worlds-style broadcast. Barry nodded. "It's pretty hard not to see something like that. I can't stop seeing it. It just keeps replaying over and over in my head." "Can I get everyone's attention?" Jerry stood in front of the large whiteboard where the employees gathered each morning for their sales meeting. His voice was more timid than usual, and his hands shook as he waved them in the air to get our attention. "We're calling it a day. We want everyone to head on home. We'll send out an email about how we're going to move forward. Go be with your families until we can get this straightened out." "Do they know what's going on?" asked Eugene, the IT manager, as he stuck his head out of his dark corner office. "I don't know," said Jerry. "They said people are going insane." Gloria was on her cell phone. "My husband's watching the news. He says they're telling people to stay away from hospitals." "What hospital?" I asked. "What hospital?" Gloria asked her husband. She repeated his reply. "All hospitals." "What the fuck?" Barry shook his head in disbelief. Gloria continued. "Stay home. Come home now." Gloria then directly responded to her husband. "I will. Just tell me what they're saying. I'm telling everyone here." "What else are they saying?" She continued her announcement. "Stay in your homes. Lock the doors and windows, and keep watching CNN." "Always worth keeping viewers, I guess." Barry smirked and patted me on the shoulder. "I'm going to need a ride home," I said. "Yeah, no problem. Let's get the hell out of here." I glanced at my watch and realized that Laura would be leaving to pick me up soon. I tried to call her on my cell, but the service was dead. "I can't get through." "Let me try mine." Barry couldn't get through either. I was about to tell him to leave without me when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Laura. "Hello?" "Oh, thank God," said Laura. "I've been trying to call you forever." "Did you see what happened at the hospital?" "No. Did you see what happened in Central Park?" "No, what happened?" I switched the phone to speaker so Barry could hear. "I can't find any local news. They just have information coming out of New York. 20 people were murdered, eaten alive. People just started eating each other. The cops started shooting people, but they just wouldn't stop. They kept eating each other. It was on the news. I saw it happen." "Stay home, Laura," said Barry. "I'll get Dave there safely." "Okay." Her voice quivered. "David?" "Yeah, honey, I'm here." She started to cry. "I'm scared." "I know. I'll be home soon. Just get the girls upstairs and lock all the doors. Get some knives or something and just get upstairs, okay?" "Okay. I think I see Alfred coming over from across the alley. He might be able to help. I'll take the girls up to the attic. We'll be safe there." "Good idea. Tell Al and Kate that they can hide with us if they want. I'll be home as soon as I can get there." "You promise?" "Trust me." It was something I said to Laura all the time, and had become a joke over the years. I was a salesman, after all, and you should never trust a salesman. Barry and I told everyone goodbye and started to make our way to the hall, past the wall of windows that looked down to the street. "Why the hell does everyone outside look so calm?" I asked as I stared out the window. If this was turning into such a catastrophe, why did everyone look so serene? What would happen when they learned about the attacks? I was afraid of the chaos that would engulf the city once that happened. We had to get out as soon as possible. A man limped out of the alley across the street. He was a vagrant I recognized from my years working downtown. I'd never seen him walk in such a jarring manner before. His arms were pressed against his chest as if he was lying down, and his legs wobbled beneath him as he walked. His feet struck the pavement in haphazard flops, and his mouth sat open as he stared at the sky. Barry and I were in a rush to get out of the office, but when I saw this man walk down the alley, I couldn't help but stop and stare. There was something wrong with him that grabbed my attention. "What's with that guy?" I asked Barry. He had to turn around and come back to me. "What, the bum? Since when do you get freaked out by the drunks around here?" We watched the man attack. He emerged from the alley and took sudden notice of the people around him. It was like watching a starving man emerge from a desert to find a buffet stretched out before him. He reached out and grabbed the first person his fingers grazed in the flow of pedestrians. It was a young woman, in her mid-20s, with her hair tied up in a bun and a well-fitted striped blouse and skirt. He grabbed her arm and pulled her out of her steady pace. She stumbled in her heels. Her right ankle crumpled, and she fell against him. I could see her expression turn from anger to terror, and she slapped her assailant's chest. The homeless man bit her face. Barry and I screamed out a slew of curses, and everyone still in the office ran to the window. We watched the scene unfold, as if staring at a massive television screen that couldn't be turned off. The horror movie was now reality, and we were stuck in it. The man's teeth latched onto her with inhuman ferocity. She pushed and hit him with her clutch, but as she pulled away, he stayed attached. It took the nearby people far too long to notice what happened. A man in a yellow and orange construction vest was the first to do anything. He grabbed the assailant and tried to pull him away, but this dragged the woman forward, and she lost her balance. She tumbled to the pavement. Her cheek ripped off in the bum's clenched teeth as she fell. Blood rolled down the man's chin as he chewed on her flesh. The woman scrambled to move away and clutched her cheek. She wailed, loud enough for us to hear behind the thick glass of our office building. Some people nearby rushed to help, while others moved to confront her attacker.
Someone call the police.
Barry turned away from the window.
Line's busy,
said Jerry, who was already trying to call. The bum wouldn't stop. He moved forward and swiped at the people that tried to keep him away. The construction worker took a swing and hit the transient on the jaw. The man's head whirled to the side, but his body didn't follow. His head hung limp to the right, while his hands gripped the construction worker's vest. The vagrant's head rolled back to bite his new victim. The construction worker fell backward, with a man holding on to him. The bum bit his neck, and blood sprayed forth like someone stuck a knife in a shaken can of soda. The construction worker cried out and tried to push the bum away. Finally, the crowd ripped the maniac off his second victim and threw him to the ground. They stomped on him. The crowd circled and kicked at his side. The man tried to grab their legs and bite their ankles, but they wouldn't stop. Over and over, their feet collided with his face and chest. He was covered in blood, and the wounds on his head gaped wide. I saw his teeth in the pool of blood beneath him, but he wasn't fazed. He pulled at the legs of the businessmen around him. He tried to grab their expensive slacks, their $100 shoes, their gold wristwatches, but his movements weakened. They had beaten him to a pulp, but he still twitched. I could see his eyes blink through his new red mask. He was still alive, but they kept trying to kill him. They stomped him, kicked him, crushed him.
Come on, man.
Barry pulled at my sleeve.
We've got to get out of here.
The sight of the crowd trying to murder that man shook me to my core. The thought of dying at the hands and feet of an angry mob made my stomach turn. Could there be a worse way to die? Chapter 2. Deadlocked. The parking garage was packed. Horns blared and people screamed out their windows as everyone sat in their cars and waited for the line to move. It took us 10 minutes to get out of Barry's parking spot and into line. After another 10 minutes, I decided to get out. I'm going to check how bad it looks. I walked over to the short concrete barrier that kept people from driving over the edge. I leaned out to stare at the traffic below. It was gridlocked. I looked back at Barry and shook my head. He rolled down his window and asked, "What? What's wrong?" "There's no way we're getting out of here, man," I said.
Fuck. Hold on a second.
He put the car in reverse and backed into a nearby spot.
I guess we're hoofing it then.
That's a hell of a walk.
We could take the train,
he said. Fuck that. They said this all started in crowded places. We walked into the closed-off concrete tower and down the stairs that led to the street below.
Do you think there's a connection between this and the terrorist stuff?
Asked Barry. Yeah, of course, don't you?
I don't know. I didn't really think about it. I can't even grasp what the fuck is happening, you know? Jesus Christ. So this is like bioterrorism then. They hit us with some virus that makes us go batshit crazy and start attacking people?
He opened the door to 13th Avenue and revealed a scene of hysteria that took my breath away. Throngs of panicked office workers had taken to the street in a race out of the city. Everyone fought to stay on their feet as the people behind them pushed forward. In our short trip down the stairs from the 3rd level, the city had descended into madness. A chubby woman fell to the ground about 5 feet in front of me. The people that ran behind her never stopped to help. At first they moved to the side to avoid her, but the ones that followed didn't see her until they were walking over her writhing form. I'm not sure if they didn't see her or purposefully walked over her, but she was crushed to death beneath their feet. I wanted to help. I swear to God I wanted to do something, but the force of the crowd was too much to contend with. I screamed out for them to stop, but they couldn't. If they stopped, they would have ended up on the ground, crushed to death as well. Barry grabbed my hand as he got caught in the exodus. If he hadn't thought to grab me, we would have been separated. The crowd pushed at our backs and determined the direction we moved. It got worse every second, and there were moments I lifted my feet off the ground and still continued moving forward. It was a claustrophobic's nightmare, but the real terror came as my feet twisted to accommodate the fleshy shapes beneath me. I was walking on people. I found an opportunity to get out of the crowd to a section of raised concrete that housed one of the few trees along 13th Avenue. I pulled on Barry's hand and steered him in the direction of the concrete square. Either we would be able to climb onto the island or be crushed against it. I hauled myself onto the concrete and pulled Barry up behind me. It gave us a vantage of the madness that swirled in every direction. People crowded 13th Avenue for blocks. I could see the tops of halted cars in the sea of people. Several of the vehicles had people on top of them that stared at the scene like we did. Victims cried out that they were being trampled. I saw one guy punch a person in the back of the head for not moving fast enough. I ignored all of this because what I could see in the distance was far, far worse. A fire had erupted outside our office. There were people in the flames that continued walking as they were immolated. They staggered through the fire and attacked those closest to them. "Do you see that?" I asked Barry. "Over there." Barry pointed in the opposite direction, to where the flow of people headed. "What?" "Look, down the road. A guy's killing someone with an axe." "Where?" I saw it before he had to show me. Not more than 50 feet ahead, I saw an axe rise in the air and then fall back down again. The crowd tried to avoid the murder, but they were packed too tight for me to get a good view. All I could see was the blood-red axe going up, then down, up, then down. It flayed streams of crimson in an arc behind it. The commotion caused the swell of people below us to slow down. I knew they were going to come to a stop, and then they would go in whatever direction was open to them, which would lead them up to us. "Come on, Barry, we've got to get out of here." "How?" The crowd had almost stopped, and several people around us had the same idea we did. They climbed onto our raised section. There was only one way out. "Up the tree." "I haven't climbed a tree in 20 years, man," said Barry. I was already making my way up. I had climbed hundreds of trees as a kid, but none of that experience helped, and I struggled to pull my way onto the lowest branch. I grabbed Barry's hand to help him as I searched for an escape. The tree looked close enough to the buildings, and I'd expected to be able to jump from it to some other platform, but now that I was here, it didn't seem quite so easy. "What the fuck do we do now?" asked Barry. "There." I pointed to a fire escape about 10 feet away. "We can get onto that and get to the roof." Barry looked at the proposed route and said, "No, we can't." "We can climb over that branch and jump." "What the fuck, are you serious? There's no way that's going to happen." Screams came from below us. I don't know what happened, but people started screeching in terror. I glanced down and thought I saw a severed head rolling on the pavement, but the crowd closed in too quick for me to be sure. I think Barry saw what it was, though, because he suddenly gained the courage to make the leap. "Go, go, go!" he said, and pushed at my back. I inched forward. For the first few steps, I could hang onto a thin branch above me for support, but the last several feet were handled like a tightrope. My bridge bent precariously, but I moved forward until it couldn't hold my weight any longer. I jumped. To my complete shock, I made it. It wasn't graceful, and I cut myself on the unforgiving grated metal, but I made it. I stood up and reached out to help Barry. He looked at me with wide eyes stricken with fear from watching me barely make the leap. I wasn't in great shape, but I was a pro athlete compared to Barry. "I can't," he said. "Come on, I'll catch you." I leaned over the edge of the fire escape and reached out to him with both arms. "I can't. There's no way. Let me go down there, and you can lower the ladder for me." "What ladder?" "Down there." He pointed along the building to a ladder that could be dropped down to 13th Avenue. "That's 30-40 feet away," I said. "You'll never get there." People climbed the tree beneath Barry. He saw them coming and must have known it was only a matter of time before they pushed past him to make the leap I'd made. Barry inched forward and gripped the branch above. He wobbled back and forth. I was certain he was going to tumble off. He made it far enough that he had to let go of the branch above and raise his arms out to either side for balance. One of the men, who had climbed the tree after us, moved out onto the branch behind Barry. He moved fast, and the branch buckled under their combined weight. "Wait your turn!" I shouted. Barry glanced up at me. I reached out as far as I could. Our fingertips touched, and he tried to reach out further. Our fingertips locked. The crowd shrieked again beneath us. I looked down and saw people attacking each other. I clenched my eyes to ignore the tumult, and then looked back at Barry. I tried to keep him focused on what he was doing. "Don't look down," I said. "Look at me! Look at me! Look at me! We can do this!" Barry kept his eyes locked on mine until our hands clasped. The man behind him moved forward and begged Barry to hurry. Then the branch broke. The snap is a sound that has haunted me just as much as the children screaming on that bus. It cracked from somewhere near the trunk, and the entire branch crashed into the people below. Barry fell forward, and I gripped onto his hand as tight as possible. No matter how many movies you watch where someone barely grabs another person by the hand and then pulls them to safety, it's just not possible. Barry fell, and my grip on his hand snapped free the second his entire weight became my responsibility. He didn't fall far, 8 feet at the most, but he fell into a pit of horror. The people around him were killing each other. They didn't just beat each other like the men in the business suits had stomped the vagrant outside our office. These people bit each other to death. They chewed pieces of flesh off the ones that tried to escape. Barry fell to the pavement as I stood above. I watched the crowd of cannibals flood over him. They fell to their knees and ripped at his flesh. They pulled his arms up and bit into them. He cried out to me for help as they ate him, but there was nothing I could do. His cries became a gurgle as he choked on his own blood. I watched my best friend get eaten alive. My heart raced, and every breath came into my lungs with a weight that crippled me. Barry was dead. It was my fault, and nothing would ever change that. I let him fall to his death. My body shook as I cried out in rage at the loss of my best friend. There wasn't time to mourn. The city was in turmoil, and I had to escape if I wanted to see my family again. I climbed the metal stairs to the top of the 5-story building. Looking back on it, I suppose I should have gone over to the ladder to lower it to 13th Avenue and save whomever I could, but I didn't. I didn't understand what was going on at the time, and my survival instinct took over. How was I supposed to know the people attacking each other were zombies? How was I supposed to know they couldn't climb a ladder? At the time, it seemed like this disease or virus or whatever it was just turned people into homicidal maniacs. No matter what anyone thinks of how I acted that day, I did what I had to. I had to get home to my family. That was the only thing that was going through my mind as I stood on that roof. I couldn't quit until I knew they were safe. Chapter 3. The Angels of Everland River. I ran across the rooftops. Most of the buildings were close enough that I could step between them, but there were a couple I had to leap across like a comic book superhero. A few groups of people had made it to the rooftops as well, and watched me run past, but everyone was in such a state of shock that no one said anything. Most of them stared over the edge at the mayhem below. I reached the last building on the block and stared down. I'd made it to Clarkson Street. Across that was the Everland River. If I could make it there, over the street, I could jump into the water and swim away. It might not be the best plan, but it was a hell of a lot better than taking the streets home. There was a thick cable stretched out from the corner of my building to a telephone pole beside a billboard that stood above the bridge. The cable was used to hang signs over the street to announce various city events. Today it displayed a big black banner for an exhibit at the Arkland Art Museum. I said a quick prayer to a god I didn't normally have time for, and then stepped onto the wire. I planned to tightrope across, but I gave up on that idea almost instantly. Instead, I got on my hands and knees and gathered my courage to do the most insane thing I'd ever attempted. I crawled out on the cable and let myself dangle upside down over the swirling throng of violence below. I wrapped my legs around the wire and pulled myself along. The steel cable burned the skin on the back of my legs through my pants. I edged my way around the banner, and the steel dug into my palms. The cable creaked under my weight, and the real possibility of it snapping ran through my head. The sounds of murder below grew into a cacophony that rattled my nerves. If I fell, I would be torn apart, just like poor Barry. I slid steadily forward until I thought I was close enough to jump to the billboard that hung over the river. I had to dangle from the cable with only my hands and swing over to the billboard's ladder. I swung back and forth to gain momentum, and the threaded cable sliced into my palms. I let go and sailed through the air. My body crashed into the ladder, and I grasped at the rungs. My chin bounced off one of the steps, and I bit into my tongue. My mouth filled with blood, and my hands were shredded, but I made it. I climbed up the ladder and moved until I stood above the middle of Everland River. People swam below, and more jumped in every minute. I watched them for a long time, partly because I wanted to see if they attacked each other, but also because I was terrified to jump 50 feet into the water. It looked a hell of a lot farther down now than when I concocted this plan. None of the people in the water attacked each other, and I nearly had myself convinced that a 50-foot fall wouldn't hurt. I took my shoes off and tossed them in the river. It would be too hard to swim if I jumped in with my clothes on. I started to take my pants off when I realized if I threw them away, I wouldn't have any place to carry my wallet, keys, and phone. If I lost my phone, I'd be cut off from my family completely. I called Laura, but couldn't get through. The lines were busy as thousands, hell, probably millions, of other worried people tried to call their loved ones at the same time. I stared at the picture of my wife and 2 girls that I'd taken for Laura's birthday. It was set as Laura's profile on my phone, and whenever I called her, it popped up on the screen. I tried to call her over and over, to keep the picture from fading to black. I wondered if I would ever see them again. I'd spent my life moving from work to bed, or at least it felt that way. I was happy to have a good job that paid enough to allow Laura to stay home with the girls, but I'd sacrificed most of my free time. It was hard to believe 5 years had passed since our first daughter, Kim, was born. Our second, Annie, had turned 3 not long ago. I loved those girls with every ounce of my being, but I'd be lying if I said I knew them. Most days I left before they woke up, and got home with just enough time to read them a story and tuck them in. That didn't leave us much time to get to know one another. Laura would send me pictures constantly, and I had the weekends with them, but free time was something I wasn't good at managing. It always seemed like there were things to do, places to be, people to have dinner with, family to visit, and a million other excuses to do something that didn't involve spending time with my kids. There were always more important things to accomplish, or so I thought at the time. I wasn't crying out of fear. I'd already accepted I was going to die. I'd been coming to grips with that ever since the doctor called. I cried because it took this moment to make me realize how much I loved my family. It took a worldwide apocalypse and staring down a 50-foot leap into the frigid water of the Everland River to get my priorities straight. "I love you guys," I said to my phone. I slipped it back into my pocket and decided to leave my pants on for the swim. I didn't want to lose my wallet, and there was at least a slim chance my phone was partially waterproof. I steadied myself with several deep breaths. Then I jumped. I tried to keep my feet straight as I plummeted, but instinct or panic took over, and I waved my arms and legs around like a cartoon coyote shot out of an Acme cannon. I hit the water ass first, and the pain shot up through my spine like a lightning bolt. The strangest tingling sensation rose to the crown of my head as I sank into the water. It was like the pins and needles you feel when your arm falls asleep, but these pins stabbed me like knives. The fall knocked the sense out of me, and I sank into the black depths of the river. The Everland devoured me, and I was complicit. The silence of the water was welcoming compared to the screaming death that waited above. All of the concerns that plagued me before I hit the water were absolved the second it swallowed me. My arms lilted above to the cadence of the current, and I smiled as I stared at them. Another set of arms reached out for me from below. I felt someone's fingers slide over my waist. They wrapped their arm over my stomach, and their fingertips tickled my side as they pulled me closer. The angels of Everland River welcomed me in. I opened my eyes to witness the gates of heaven hidden in the blackness at the bottom of the river. I was ready to be ushered inside. Gnashing teeth lunged at my face, and any sense of comfort I'd experienced evacuated my muddled head. Someone tried to eat me down there. I struggled and kicked at my submerged attacker, but it held onto my belt and pulled me closer. I swallowed water as I gasped, and my terror doubled when I felt myself drowning. Not only was I going to be eaten alive, I was going to drown while it happened. The jaws snapped at me again, and I used my right hand to grab the person's neck and push them back. I struggled to take off my pants with my left hand, which was a hell of a lot harder than I would have thought. I unbuckled the belt and managed to kick free. My attacker helped as he pulled at the waistband, which allowed me to get free quicker than I could have alone. Once my legs were out, I pushed against the man standing on the bottom of the river and left him behind with my pants and phone as a souvenir. He reached out for me again, but I managed to escape. I saw his eerie, bloated face grimacing up at me. I struggled to the surface, swimming harder than I knew I could. I gasped for air when my head crested the waves. I'd swallowed a big gulp of water down below and had trouble breathing. I sputtered and choked, but I was alive. Somehow, I had escaped a horrific death. And then the boat hit me. What fucking luck. Some jackass motored down the river in his fishing boat, cracking the skulls of anyone in his way as he raced out of the city. I emerged from the water just in time to get smacked back under by the fiberglass bottom. The pain debilitated me, and I felt his rear motor whirl above as he passed, inches from my head. My mind spun, and it was hard to discern which way was up as I bobbed under the waves. I don't think I consciously reached the surface, but rather just floated up there to stare at the blue, cloudless sky. The screaming around me came into focus, then out again, then back as the waves lapped over me. It was like I was falling in and out of a cavern, the echoes of torture and death reverberating through my skull as I fell. I glanced to the side and saw people leap into the water from the concrete bank. Some of them shrieked, some cried, and others chewed on human flesh as they fell in. There was blood everywhere. The water wasn't blue anymore. It was viscous crimson. Seeing the blood helped me remember I was trying to survive, and bobbing in the waves wasn't going to keep me alive much longer. This waterway led to the bay, where sharks were certainly enticed by the flow of blood. It wouldn't be long before they found their way to this feast. I started to swim again, and was able to get a better sense of my surroundings once my head was out of the water. That's when I heard the pontoon boat coming. There were people at the front who screamed at everyone to move out of the way, but just like the first boat, they didn't stop for anything. It headed my way and punted the other bobbing heads back under water as it came. I swam to the right, and it missed me. I was close enough that I grabbed the side to be carried along, but my fingers slipped off the edge. I clawed at anything I could as the boat moved away, and I managed to pull a life preserver off the side. I looped my arm through it just as the slack of the rope connecting it to the boat tightened. I was pulled along, and my head dragged beneath the waves as my grip on the life preserver slipped. I struggled against the water to pull myself up, but the boat moved too fast. The water pushed against my face, and I couldn't manage to breathe in the brief seconds between my continued submersions. I would have to let go to keep from drowning, but I wanted to be ferried along as far as possible. To my relief, the boat slowed down. As the waves relented, and we slowed to a near stop, I was able to pull myself up onto the life preserver and gasp for breath. I had to blink away the blood and water that stung my eyes before I could see again. The first thing I saw was a police officer on the back of the pontoon with a pistol pointed at me. "Don't shoot me," I said. The cop was startled and raised his gun.
"This one's talking," he said to someone else on the boat.
"I don't give a fuck,"
said a gruff voice with a southern twang.
"Shoot him."
The black cop lowered his gun at me again.
"What the hell? Don't shoot me,"
I said.
"Are you dead?"
he asked.
"What?"
The question made no sense to me.
"Does it sound like I'm dead?"
Another cop, this one carrying a shotgun, appeared beside his fellow officer. He stared down at me, then turned to his friend and said,
"He's dead."
"I'm not dead."
"Look at his head. If he ain't dead, he will be soon,"
said the second white cop. Shots rang out from the front of the boat, and the cop with the shotgun walked away to see what had happened. The black cop got down on his knees to talk to me.
"I ain't gonna pull you up, but if you can hang on, we're heading out to Haley's End. That island out there in the bay. If you can hold on, maybe we'll get the doctor to check you out over there. He's more of a scientist than a doctor, but he might be able to help you. Can you hold on?"
I bobbed about 10 feet behind the boat, and had trouble hearing what the officer said above the yelling that came from the streets around us, but I nodded as if I understood everything. The pontoon started to move again. It chugged slowly at first, and I floated through the carnage that littered the Everland River. A couple bodies floated past in the red water, and I heard people scream from the concrete shores. They begged us to pick them up. Some people jumped in the water and tried to swim our way, but the pontoon picked up speed to leave them behind. I wasn't certain, but I thought I saw a shark's fin pass between a few swimmers, as other desperate people leapt in. The idea that the hell above water was worse than a shark-infested feeding frenzy rattled me. We passed the boat that had struck me in the head moments before. It was stuck against the concrete basin, and people from above leapt into it. It took on water, and the front plunged under the waves. The man that sat at the motor yelled at the people that tried to hijack him, but it was useless. The boat filled with water and sank. The pontoon moved faster, and the waves rose back up over my head. I had to gasp for a final breath and then hold on for dear life as it raced away from the city. Every second I stayed with them was a second closer to home, and I needed to make sure my family was safe. Chapter 4. Sitting on the dock of the bay. I held on for as long as I could, but I would have drowned if I stayed with them much further. When I emerged from their wake, I found myself in the middle of Haley Bay, 100 yards away from the city's shore. My house was in a neighborhood on the other side of the bay from the city, which meant I had to swim the rest of the way. My muscles burned, and the wound on my head pulsed. I could feel the warm blood run down my face if I sat above the water for more than a couple seconds. If not for the cleansing waves, I would have been more concerned about my wound, but every time I went under, they washed away the evidence of my injury and allowed me to forget it was there. I should have been concerned about sharks, but if they were attracted to blood, then they'd certainly swarm to the Everland, as it dumped gallons of it into the bay. I'd been lucky enough to get pulled out of the massacre that was unfolding near the city's shore. I thought about my family. More specifically, I thought about my oldest daughter, Kim. I thought about the day she was born, and the first time she said, "Daddy." I thought about her smile and the way she hugged me at bedtime. I thought about how she would climb into my bed in the morning and slip between Laura and me. I thought about the way she would kiss my cheek and tell me good morning. I thought about the moments that come and go with little recognized significance at the time, but mean everything when you're afraid you'll never have them again. Memories of Kim helped me find the strength to swim. I kept my eyes on the shore, which didn't seem to get closer no matter how hard I swam. My legs seized up, and the pain from the wound on my head made me dizzy. I tried to keep kicking, but my muscles grew stiff in the chilling water, and I began to sink. I thought about my youngest daughter, Annie. I thought about her curly red hair. I thought about the way Laura's mother fawned over her and laughed at how our daughter had inherited her fuzzy head of hair. I thought about the time Annie got a plastic race car stuck in that fuzzy hair and ran around the house like her head was on fire. I thought about the time she managed to unlock the front door and wandered into the neighborhood. I thought about the moment I found her in our neighbor's backyard, playing on their swing set as if everything was perfectly fine. I thought about how I picked her up and squeezed her in my arms as I cried and cried and cried. Memories of Annie gave me the strength to carry on. I continued my journey and fought against the waves that seemed determined to force me under. Every foot I swam felt like 10, and the water pulled at me as if trying to carry me under. The glimpses of shore were interrupted by the rolling beat of the waves that washed over my face and stung my eyes. My stomach clenched, then convulsed. My abdomen quaked in pain. There was no way I could keep swimming. The seizures in my belly didn't stop, and I vomited up bile and blood. I let myself fall below the waves to get away from the puke. I considered giving up and letting myself sink to the bottom. I thought about Laura. Before, when I imagined my girls, I recalled several moments I shared with them, but with Laura, I thought of just one. I thought about the look on her face the moment she said, "I do." I was a nervous wreck at our wedding. I've never been a very competent public speaker, and standing in front of people was always uncomfortable for me. I was all but useless on our wedding day. My hands shook, my legs trembled, and it seemed like a monumental task to repeat the words the judge spoke. I thought about the moment I slipped Laura's wedding band on her finger. I thought about looking into her eyes. I thought about the smile, tender and sweet, that she gave me in that moment. She was calm, content, and perfect in every way a woman could ever possibly be. Memories of Laura gave me the strength to keep swimming. Her beautiful smile could carry me home. I reached the shore of Haley Bay after having used every last ounce of willpower in me. I clawed at the rocky shore and dragged myself away from the waves, past the broken pieces of debris that had washed up before me. I collapsed beside a pile of rotted seaweed, with my face pressed into the decaying pillow. I closed my eyes for what I thought was a second.
"This one,"
said a man's voice above me. I felt a boot kick my cheek, and I opened my eyes. A man wearing black rubber boots stood above and pointed at me. He motioned for someone nearby to come to him. I saw another man, much younger and also wearing black boots and a yellow poncho, walk over to us. He raised a wooden oar high into the air, and then brought it down fast, the edge of the fat end aimed at my face. "No!" I said, and raised my arm in time to block the oar. The force of the strike crashed into my left forearm. I bellowed in agony.
"Oh, shit,"
said the man with the oar.
"He's not dead." "Can they talk?"
asked the one that found me.
"I don't think so."
I moaned in pain and rolled around on the rocks.
"Oh, shit, buddy, sorry, I thought you were dead,"
said the bearded man that had kicked me in the face moments earlier. He helped me to my feet, and then let go, whereupon I swiftly fell back down. My swim through Haley Bay had sapped me, and standing wasn't an option. The two fishermen raised me up, and the bearded one wrapped my arm around his shoulder to help me walk along the shore. To be honest, he carried me as my legs shifted uselessly beneath. We made it to a wooden dock, where he set me down.
"You okay?"
asked the younger man. "No, I'm not okay," I spoke through clenched teeth.
"Hey, man, I'm sorry, but I thought you were dead."
"If you thought I was dead, why the hell were you going to bash my head in?"
"How else was I supposed to kill you?"
asked my assailant. I looked up at them as if they had started speaking in tongues. What the fuck does that mean?
"Don't you know what's happening?"
asked the older one. "I was in the city. I saw what's happening. Still doesn't explain why you were trying to bash the brains out of someone you thought was dead."
"Then you don't know what's happening,"
said the kid. "What do you mean?"
"Zombie apocalypse."
The young man set his oar on his shoulder and smiled down at me.
"I know it sounds insane," said the older one, "but Billy's right. I wouldn't have believed it either, but I saw it with my own eyes. Bodies came washing up on shore and stood right up and started trying to eat people. Worst damn thing I've ever seen in all my life. Pure fucking insanity."
"I need to get home," I said. Looking back on it, I don't think anything the fisherman told me sank in. My brain was suffering a mix of physical trauma and utter confusion.
"Where do you live?"
asked the grizzled old man. "Courtshire, on the other side of Bayshore." I pointed in a direction away from the bay, but I have no idea if I pointed the right way.
"How about you let us get you a pair of pants before you head out?"
That's when I realized I was half naked. I got up, brushed the sand off my ass, and stared down at my sopping, wet, naked lower half. I was almost embarrassed, but I stopped caring just as quickly. What did it matter who saw my dick? The world was ending.
"Come on,"
said the older man as he pulled me back into his supporting arms.
"We live right over there. Come on, Billy," he said to the younger fisherman. "Let's get this guy a pair of pants and some coffee."
I wasn't in a place to argue. My legs still didn't work, and I suspected shambling through the streets half naked with my head bleeding profusely would raise my chances of getting mistaken for a zombie by a few 1,000%. The fishermen were father and son. The dad's name was William, and his son was William Jr., but everyone just called him Billy. They told me they were shrimpers and had been out in the bay when the news of the attacks hit. I told them I was on my way to get my wife and daughters. Then I asked if they'd seen the school bus of kids eating each other, but they said they'd been watching a different channel and saw a story about a hospital in New York. They said it started in the ER. People that had come down with the mystery virus started to die, then come back to life. The reporter at the scene was attacked on camera, and they saw him being eaten alive before the camera feed died.
"End of the world,"
said William. He handed me a hot cup of coffee that I was glad to accept. My left arm was in a sling, and they'd helped me bandage my head up. I wasn't sure if my arm was broken, but it sure hurt a hell of a lot. "Why aren't you guys hiding?" I asked.
"We don't need to hide," said Billy. "We've got a fence round us, 10 foot high, leads all the way to the road and back to the shore. As long as we don't let those water zombies wash up, we're safe as can be." "I've been building a salvage yard here," said William. "We've been working on it for about a year. Got the walls patched up and already getting some contracts, but we keep the shrimper going to pay the bills for the time being. Of course, Junior here's going to be a professional baseballer in a few years, so we'll probably just sell off the yard when that happens. Ain't that right, Slugger?"
"Yep." "Is that why you're so good at swinging that oar?" I raised my swollen left arm as evidence of his prowess.
"He's an all-star hitter, pal," said William. "We just got the news that he got a scholarship. He's going to be the next Barry Bonds. He's been knocking the heads off zombies all afternoon. Boy's got talent."
"Yeah, well, I guess that dream's shot to shit." I sipped my coffee and didn't think twice about what I said. However, when I looked back at Billy and William, it seemed like my comment was the first jarring moment in which they understood how different their lives had become.
"I guess you're right,"
said William with an uncomfortable laugh. He sat down in a chair beside me and poured himself the last of the coffee.
"I guess I can kiss my season passes goodbye."
"Fuck that," said Billy, in defiance of our melancholy.
"This is America, man. We'll get through this shit. Give us a few months and everything will be back to normal. I promise you that."
"I hope you're right, Bud," I said. "I really do." William chugged his coffee and then slapped his hands on the table.
"Well, we'd better get a move on. You've got to get home to your family, and we've got to make sure there ain't no more zombies washing up on our shore. Think you can walk?"
"I guess so." I stood up with a generous amount of support from their kitchen table.
"You can take Billy's truck if you want,"
said William. I glanced up at Billy to see if he had a problem with it, but he just nodded.
"Fuck it, take it. We got Dad's truck if we need it."
He dug into his pocket and tossed me his keys. "Wow. Thank you. I don't know what to say."
"Just get home to your girls. Make sure they're safe," said William.
An idea hit me as I got ready to leave. "You guys still have the boat, right?" William nodded.
"The Casper. It's out by the dock. Why?"
"If I can get my family back here, would you be willing to head out into the bay with us? We could bring some food and water and supplies, and we could just head out there and wait for this shit to calm down."
"That's not a bad idea," said William. "Hadn't thought of that."
"You sure you want to just go out in the water and sit around?" asked Billy.
"Seems like we're just safe in the yard, what with the walls and all. I'm not too keen on staying out in the middle of the bay for days. And what if Mom comes looking for us?"
"Trust me, Billy," I said. "If what's happening in the city starts happening here, that oar won't do you much good. When I was swimming in the bay, there were zombies on the bottom. One of them tried to drag me under. It's only a matter of time before they get here. You'd be safer in the bay. I don't think these zombies, or whatever they are, can swim, but they can obviously walk around down there."
"He's right," said William. "You know how much your mom hates the government, too. There's no way she's leaving her apartment if the police and the army are showing up like the TV said."
He glanced at his watch and then at me.
"How much time do you think you'd need?"
"Half-hour at most."
"What if there's a lot of traffic?"
"I can take the side streets to get from here to my house. I don't think it'll be a problem." William took Billy's keys out of my hand and gave me a new set.
Here, take my truck. It's a four-wheeler and a hell of a lot tougher than Billy's pussy wagon. You get home and get your family, get some supplies, and get back here. If you can get back by, say, 2 o'clock, then we'll take you out into the bay. That gives you almost 45 minutes. Should be plenty of time."
"What happens at 2? asked Billy.
"We set sail,"
said William.
"We'll head out to the bay. If you can't make it back by 2, just get in the yard and wait a day. We'll swing back by tomorrow at noon to look for you."
I swigged the last of my coffee and shook both their hands.
"I owe you my life. I don't know how to thank you."
"Just get your girls back here safe,"
said William.
"And try not to get yourself eaten," said Billy.
Chapter 5. Neighborhood Watch. William's truck was a lot nicer than I expected a fisherman would own. It looked brand new, and the upholstery inside was impeccably clean. It did stink of fish, but I guess that comes with the territory. I drove up to the gate, and William unlatched it. He slid the rusty old door to the side, just enough to fit his head through to make sure it was safe. He nodded to me, and then opened the gate all the way. He motioned for me to roll down my window so we could talk.
"When you get back, just lay on the horn a few times. I'll come let you in."
"All right, William. Thanks again." And with that, I was off. The traffic was building all throughout town, but I'd lived here for 20 years and knew these streets better than most. I never expected my time as a pizza delivery boy to come in handy, but as I navigated the alleys and avenues of Bayshore, I was thankful for that summer spent stinking of pepperoni and sausage. I passed a few grocery stores and saw people ransacking the aisles, looking to gather supplies. The parking lots were packed, and it was clear anyone dumb enough to pull a car in there wasn't getting out again any time soon. I tried to think of what supplies I should bring to the boat. We didn't have enough at home to feed all of us for an extended period of time. We would have to think of some place other than a grocery store to get the things we needed, but that was a problem I could deal with later. First, I needed to get home. The streets of our subdivision were all but abandoned. I saw a few neighbors packing things into their cars, but there wasn't the sense of urgency I was afraid I would find. It was a relief that the panic hadn't stricken the suburbs the way it had the city. It would make our escape easier. I pulled into my driveway and hurried to get inside the house. I got to the front door and instinctually tried to unlock it with William's keys. Then I remembered my own keys were lying at the bottom of Everland River. Fuck. I tried the door and found it locked. I moved to the large window of our front room, but it was shut as well. Laura had done a good job, getting everything locked up tight.
"Laura!"
I called up to the attic.
"Honey, it's me. Let me in."
No answer. I grabbed a rock and threw it at the small attic window. It bounced off the house's siding and fell to the ground. I tried again with a similar result, and then yelled her name a few more times.
"David?"
I heard her say from the back of the house.
"Help! Help!"
My heart seized when I heard her cries. I ran around the back of the house to see what was wrong. I opened the gate and saw the back door had been broken down.
"Laura?"
"David!"
she called down to me from the roof. I looked up and saw that she and my 2 daughters were hiding up there.
"Look out!"
She was warning me about something, but I couldn't fathom what. That's when I saw the zombies in my house. 2 of them roamed around, and they'd heard my shouts. They charged out of the house, burst through the wrecked door, and raced into the backyard at full speed. I didn't have much time to react. I was able to deflect the first attack by pushing the zombie to the side, where it fell face first into the dirt, but the second one caught me and grabbed onto the jacket William had given me. We fell to the ground, and I wrestled with the zombie to keep its teeth away. I recognized the creature. It was my neighbor, Alfred, from across the alley. His skin was gray, and his eyes had a milky haze, but other than that, he looked pretty much the same. I held him by the throat and pushed him away from me, but he was heavy and had fallen on top of me when we hit the ground. I heard my wife and children scream as they watched. I couldn't help but think of Barry getting eaten alive back in the city. The last thing I wanted was to let them see the same thing happen to me. Well, to be honest, the last thing I wanted was to get eaten alive, but having my family watch was a close second. Laura hung from the roof and let herself fall. She hit the ground hard and yelped in pain as her knees buckled. She rolled to the side and grabbed a shovel I'd left out last weekend while digging up a new garden. She always used to yell at me when I left the tools out of the shed. She said I was letting them rust, and that leaving them out made us look like white trash. I bet she was happy about my laziness now. I know I was. She smashed Alfred on the side of the head, and he went limp long enough for me to push him off. She moved in for the kill and launched a series of vicious attacks on his smashed face. "Laura, stop." "No, you have to destroy their brains," she said as she drove the shovel into Al's face. "No, stop, there's another one." The other zombie, Alfred's wife, had gotten back up from where I'd thrown her down. She growled at us and charged. This time, I kicked her knee. It was a move I never understood why more action movies didn't feature. If you ever get in a street brawl and have the chance to take out your opponent's knee, do it. They fall right to the ground, just as I'd always suspected. Or at least zombies do. Kate fell forward, and Laura was quick to strike. She drove the shovel into the back of Kate's neck. She struck 3 more times, until we were convinced the creature would stay down. Then we looked up at the roof, where our daughters, Kim and Annie, were huddled together. "Our psychiatrist bills are going to be outrageous," I said. Laura dropped the shovel and rushed to embrace me. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Are you hurt bad?" "I'm alive. That's all that matters." "I'm so happy you're here. I was so worried." "We're going to be fine." I pulled away from her embrace and kissed her. "I love you, Laura. I would die before I let anything happen to you." Chapter 6. School Vandalism. Laura told me she'd been getting the girls ready to move into the attic when our neighbors attacked. They must have died in their house and then went out their back door to eat the first people they saw, which happened to be my family. Laura and the girls were chased into one of the upstairs bedrooms, where they retreated to the roof. They'd been up there ever since, forced to watch as our neighbors were attacked. I told her what happened to me and about the plan to go back to the salvage yard and escape on the shrimp boat. We gathered together what little supplies we could find and loaded them into the truck. Laura agreed to drive since my arm was hurt and my head was a mess. As I look back on our escape, I have to wonder why we didn't think to bring any weapons along. We were in such a hurry to leave that the thought of having to fight off attackers didn't register. I guess killing people isn't something you usually prepare for on a trip out with a family. "Are we going to Chuck's?" "No. The grocery stores are a death trap. I passed a few on the way here, and they were being mobbed." "Then where are we supposed to get the stuff we need?" she asked, and I had no ideas. This was the problem I'd resigned to deal with later, and now that later had arrived, I was at a loss. "What about my school?" asked our oldest daughter, Kim. This was her first year of kindergarten at Orchard Park Elementary. She was out of school today because the first Wednesday of each month was a teacher's day. "They have lots of food there." I thought about it for a second, and then gave my wife a bemused glance. That's actually a really good idea. "Good job, Kim," said Laura. Kim smiled as I kissed the top of her head. We set off to the school, which was only a few blocks away, and I felt confident with our plan. I'd made it to my girls, and we were going to be safe. Despite my worst fears, we were going to make it out of this alive. Laura used alleys to avoid traffic, and then we drove the truck onto Orchard Park's soccer field and sped along. Our daughters laughed and jostled up and down as we plowed across the grass. I put my arm over their laps while I laughed along with them. We pulled up to the back of the school, and I got out to check a few of the doors. They were locked, and it seemed like all of the teachers had gone home. I had Laura get out of the truck, and then turned it around so the bed faced a set of double doors. I said sorry to William before I slammed on the gas and raced in reverse. The first hit barely shook the doors, but the second strike did the job just fine. The truck's rear end was bashed to hell, but I didn't think William would mind too much. "Where's the cafeteria?" I asked. I didn't know the layout of the school at all. I'd only been there once, but Laura volunteered frequently, so she was able to lead us around. "The girls and I will start getting food," she said. "You go to the nurse's office and get some things that we'll need from there." I hadn't thought of that, once again proving my family was a lot smarter than me. Although, in retrospect, splitting up was exactly the sort of thing I would have yelled at an actor for doing in a horror movie. As much as I never suspected to fall into a stupid victim cliché, I leapt right into one the first chance I got. Laura pointed me in the right direction, and I found the nurse's office near the front of the school. The door was locked, but it was easy enough to kick in. I grabbed a My Little Pony backpack from the Lost and Found and started to fill it with bandages, gauze, and rubbing alcohol. I went back to find my family once the bag was full, luckily avoiding the certain death I would have been guaranteed had I been in a movie. We focused on canned food and other things that we knew would last. My daughter was the first person to think of raiding the school, and the cafeteria was still well stocked. Even after multiple trips, the cafeteria was still loaded with food. I checked the time. We only had 15 minutes to get back to the dock before William and his son left us behind. "This'll be our last trip. We've got to get back to the salvage yard." "Okay," said Laura. "Come on, girls." The four of us dragged the last of our plunder down the hall to the truck. It was already filled from our previous trips, which together with this haul would be enough to feed us for several weeks, if needed. We were almost to the door when I saw someone picking through what we had already scavenged. I dropped my bag and motioned for the girls to stay back. I moved to the door as quiet as I could to see what was happening. There were two men, one standing in the back of our truck and one beside it. To my relief, I saw they weren't zombies. I opened the door and startled them. "That's our stuff," I said. I'd been through so much already that I didn't consider this might be a dangerous situation. The man in the back of the truck pulled a gun on me.
"Not no more, motherfucker,"
said the young man with the shaved head, as he pointed the revolver at me. My decision not to search for a weapon at our house suddenly vexed me. I put my hands up. "Calm down, man. There's tons of food in here, plenty for everyone."
"Good then,"
said the second, chubbier man that stood on the side of William's truck.
"There'll be plenty more for you when we take this load." "Give me the keys,"
said the one standing in the truck bed. He kept the gun pointed at my head as he walked to the back of the truck. "Come on, man," I said. "You've already got a truck." I motioned towards the truck parked beside ours.
"Yeah, we're taking yours now, too,"
said the one with the gun.
"Now give us your keys."
"I don't have them. The cops I came here with have them. Want me to go get them?"
"Fuck you,"
said the chubby one.
"I watched you and that bitch drive through the field. You ain't got no cops in there, you fucking liar."
The one with the gun hopped off the back of the truck and stared me down as he approached. I tried to block the doorway to give Laura and the girls a chance to escape. I didn't think the two men had seen them in there, and I hoped they'd move into one of the classrooms to hide.
"Why are you trying to get cute with me?"
asked the skinny one. He got up next to me and pressed the barrel of the gun against my forehead. "Okay, fine," I said. "Take the truck. Take our stuff. We don't want any trouble." William had said if we didn't make it back by 2 o'clock, that he would come back tomorrow. I didn't want to risk getting myself or anyone in my family shot just to protect the first hall from this well-stocked school.
"Too late, bro,"
said the one with the gun.
"Now I'm gonna shoot you for the hell of it."
"Can I tell you something before you shoot me?" I was sick of getting fucked with today. I've always been a docile guy. I could count the number of times I'd been in a fight before that day on one hand, or to be honest, on one finger. But this goon hadn't just threatened my safety. He threatened the safety of the people I loved most.
"You can tell me where the fucking keys are, you dumb motherfucker."
He pressed the barrel harder against my forehead, and I stumbled back a step. "I got bit," I said. "That's what happened to my arm. I got bit by a zombie, and now I'm infected."
"What the fuck?"
asked the one with the gun.
"You trying to convince me to blow your head off or what, bro?"
"No, you don't want to shoot me," I said as calmly as I could. I'd been a salesman for 20 years, and the first rule of sales is confidence in your product. My product was a lie about my own infection and how the virus spread. I needed to sell this better than anything I'd ever sold in my life. That's how the virus is spread.
"What the fuck you talking about?"
asked the chubby one. "When you shoot someone, you vaporize their blood." I did my best to relay everything as if it was common knowledge. It was a sales technique in which you give information in a way that sounds like you assume the person being sold already knew it. It makes the buyer feel smart and in control of the conversation, even though they're being sold. The bullet's force causes tiny particles of blood to go into the air. I'm sure you've seen stuff about it on one of those crime scene investigation shows. The forensic shows. You know what I'm talking about? I think they call it blood clouds or blood vapor or something like that.
"Fuck you, man,"
said the one with the gun.
"No, Jay, I've heard of that shit. I think you might be right,"
said the chubby one. "If you shoot one of these zombies, you'll end up getting blood vapor in your eyes. That's all it takes. It was on the news just like an hour ago. This virus is super contagious. If even a tiny bit of the blood vapor gets in you, you'll turn into one of them." I saw the man with the gun glance up at the bloody gauze wrapped around my head. When he looked up, I took the opportunity to grab his wrist with my right hand and move the gun away from my head. He pulled the trigger, but the bullet struck the ceiling of the hallway behind me, and I had enough time to kick his knee. He fell down, and I pulled his arm up to my mouth. "Drop it, or I'll bite you!" I bit into his arm, hard enough to hurt, but not enough to break the skin. My left ear rang from the gun blast, and my heart pounded as I struggled to hold on to him. Jay squealed in terror. He dropped the gun and pulled away from me with all his strength. I was far too weak to hold on and had to let him go. He skittered across the pavement toward his fat friend.
"Get the fuck away from our truck,"
said Laura as she appeared. She brandished the dropped pistol.
"You're fucking crazy,"
said Jay as he stood up.
"You ain't gonna shoot no one. Give the gun back to us, man, cunt."
Laura lowered the gun and shot him in the leg. "Watch your mouth," she said, as Jay squealed and fell into his friend's arms. The thugs retreated to their truck while we loaded the girls into ours. Laura kept the gun pointed at them as we moved, and I kissed her on the cheek before going to my side. "Did you really get bit?" she asked. "No, that was bullshit."
"Motherfucker,"
said the chubby one. Laura started to laugh. "You really are the best goddamn salesman I've ever met." "Pays to be a liar, babe," I said as I got in the truck. She handed me the gun when she got in, and I reached out the window to point it at them. "Do yourself a favor and get some food from the cafeteria. There's plenty there. And I left a bunch of supplies in the nurse's office you can use to patch up the gunshot."
"I'm going to kill you two motherfuckers,"
said Jay. Laura started the truck. I leaned further out the window to say my goodbye. "Oh, and one last thing. Don't ever threaten my family again." I fired a shot into his tire. It exploded with a violent whine and hiss as the air escaped. I accepted the idea that I might die that day, but it wouldn't be those two pieces of shit that finished me off. Chapter 7. A Thug's Life. Laura drove the truck across the soccer field and back onto the street. I was pretty happy with the result of our confrontation and couldn't stop from smiling as I did my best to reassure my daughters that I'd been lying about getting bit. "Daddy's a big fat liar, girls," said Laura, and we shared a laugh. Then she stiffened when she saw something in the rear view. "Oh, shit." "What's wrong?" I asked. I looked back to see what she was concerned about. The thugs had followed us. I saw their truck jump over the edge of the field and onto the road where their flat tire sparked against the blacktop. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "I can't drive too fast, Dave," said Laura. "The girls aren't buckled in. We can't drive like crazy. I'm not going to be able to outrun them." "They've got a flat," I said. "It's not going to be easy for them to follow us, and I've got a gun, so if they get too close, I can take a few shots at them." "I'm scared," said Kim as she started to tremble. I held her hand and kissed her on the forehead. "Sweetie, don't worry. Mommy and I aren't going to let anything happen to you. We're going to get to the boat and all go for a really fun ride out in the bay." Dave, said Laura. I looked up and saw an accident ahead that a few cars were stuck behind. There was no way for us to get around it. The roadway was limited to one lane, and there were houses on either side. "Go up on the lawns," I said. "There are trees, Dave. There's no room to drive around the accident." She started to panic. "Then stop and let me out," I said. "What? No way." "Stop the truck and let me out!" I had to yell to get her to stop now, before she got too close to the rest of the stopped traffic, or my plan wasn't going to work. She slowed down, and I opened my door before we came to a full stop. "When you hear me start shooting, drive the truck up onto that lawn, okay?" "Why?" she asked. "What are you doing?" "Just do it, Laura. Trust me." I slammed the door shut and walked out into the middle of the road. I ran at the truck that bore down on my family. I ran as fast as I could with the gun pointed straight ahead. I could see the two thugs lower themselves down in their seats when they saw me point the gun at them. They were going to ram our truck, just as I expected. I took a couple shots at them. I could only hope Laura had enough time to drive onto the lawn. My shots blew through their windshield and caused flowers of cracks to erupt around the bullet holes. My goal wasn't to hit them, although I wouldn't care if I had. I just needed to force them to look away from the road. I dove to the side as their truck passed, but I fired another shot at the back of the window to keep them bent down. The chubby one sped up, intent on ramming our truck as hard as he could, but Laura had done as I asked, and pulled onto one of the lawns lining the road. They rammed the car that had been in front of us, a small sedan, and their truck skidded off to the left side. Laura backed up and turned around. She drove over to me, and I climbed in with a smile. "See, babe? When are you going to learn to trust me?" "Since when are you an action hero?" she asked. "Since today, about 4 hours ago." "Well, stop it. It's freaking me out." We took a different route through the neighborhood to avoid the crash, but it didn't take us long to get down to the street that William's salvage yard was on. I checked my watch as we neared the gate. It was 1:58. 43 minutes had passed since I'd left. We were cutting it a little too close, but we made it nonetheless. "Look," said Laura, as she pointed down the street. There was a mob of people halfway down the block, past the entrance to the salvage yard. "Are those zombies?" I asked. "I think so." "Okay." I tried to stay calm. "Just pull up to the gate slowly. I'll get out and see if I can get William's attention without having to honk the horn. We don't want to draw their attention." She pulled into the gravel driveway and stopped in front of the gate. I got out and climbed onto the hood to scan the yard. William was down by the dock near the shrimp boat. I called out to him as quietly as I could manage. He heard me after a few calls and waved with an enormous smile. I was about to jump down from the hood when I saw the thugs rounding the corner onto the street, right on our trail. Laura heard the wrenching screech of their flat tire, and she yelled for me to get back in the truck. The zombie horde heard them as well. They bolted our way. William unlatched the gate and started the arduous task of sliding it open. I grabbed it from my side and pushed as well, doubling the speed. We got it open enough for Laura to get the truck through, and I jumped off the hood so that she could hurry. The truck tires struggled to catch hold in the gravel when she gunned it, spitting rocks up behind her as the vehicle inched forward. The thugs bore down on us in their smashed truck. I moved back onto the road. I hoped it was me they were set on running down and not my girls. I was right, and they adjusted their trajectory to collide with me in the middle of the street. I raised my gun and aimed at the windshield that had been partially kicked out. I could see the chubby fucker driving, and he stared me down, daring me to shoot him. He must have learned his lesson about taking his eyes off the road from our last encounter. All the while, the zombie horde charged at my back. I watched out of the corner of my eye as Laura got the truck into the salvage yard. As soon as she was in, I put the gun down and ran toward the entrance. The thugs turned to the right to hit me, but their flat tire made it hard for the truck to respond. Otherwise, they would have certainly run me down. Instead, they clipped me as I dove away. The edge of their truck crashed into my hip and spun me in the air before I collided with a gravel driveway. Their truck jumped the curb and plummeted into William's fence. The front end broke through a portion of it and left their truck balanced on a cracked post. The zombie horde surged over the truck as the two thugs tried to get out. The screams of the driver were horrific, and the other man, the one Laura shot in the leg, fell out of the truck and looked at me as he crawled my way. I was looking in his eyes when the zombies overtook him. He wailed as they bit into his flesh. I aimed the gun at Jay's head and took the shot. I couldn't watch another person get eaten alive, even if they deserved it. No one should die that way. Chapter 8. A Father's Responsibility. My gunshot alerted the zombies to my presence, and they turned their attention to me. I tried to shoot them, but the gun was out of bullets. I'd made it all this way and was going to die right at the end. A zombie ran at me and skid on his knees when he hit the gravel. His arms reached out and his mouth gaped wide in anticipation of my flesh. An oar swished above my head and caught the zombie in the face. The monster's head flipped through the air behind it, and I heard Billy scream in triumph.
Woohoo! Did you see that one, Dave?
Asked William.
Told you he was a natural.
That morning, if someone asked me if it was possible to knock a person's head off with an oar, I would have laughed at the thought. By that afternoon, I would have been proven wrong. I watched a zombie's head fly through the blue, cloudless sky and bounce off the top of the thug's truck. William gathered me up in his arms and pulled me to my feet.
Can you walk?
I think so. Billy closed the gate after knocking down a few more zombies. He was a lot stronger than his father or me, and had no trouble sliding the massive gate shut.
Billy, come on. Everyone, get on the boat,
said William. Laura and the girls had grabbed as many bags as they could and dragged them down to the Casper. The dock stretched out in the water about 30 feet, which would give us a good place to defend ourselves against the coming horde if we had to. Kim put on the My Little Pony backpack filled with medical supplies and pulled a bag full of canned fruit along the dock behind her. Annie was too small to help out much, but she proudly hoisted a bag with 2 loaves of bread in it. She turned to smile at me, and then dropped the loaves to wave. I waved back, and she blew me a kiss. She picked the loaves back up and ran to catch up with her sister. Laura looked over her shoulder to see where I was. She cried out in panic for me to watch out as she tossed her bags into the boat. I looked back up the hill and saw what she was yelling about. 4 zombies had crawled through the break in the fence that the thugs made when they crashed their truck.
"Get to the boat,"
William said as he let me go. William and his son stood defiantly before the approaching zombies. Billy looked like he was facing down a major league pitcher as he stood there, holding his oar an inch over his shoulder, in a stance he must have practiced 1,000 times. William picked up a short piece of rebar and looked like an officer carrying a baton, ready to face off against a riot. The zombies rushed down the hill. They moaned and growled with hunger, and were met with swift strikes by the father and son team. I moved forward to help, but William chastised me.
"Get on the fucking boat, you dumbass,"
he said. I wordlessly complied, and limped down the dock. I heard William speak to his son, and realized he'd been yelling at him, not me.
"I said get on the goddamn boat, Billy. It's not going to start itself."
"Me? What the—" Billy stammered as he fought alongside his dad.
"Get your ass on that boat."
"What about you?" asked Billy.
"I'll be there in a minute. You go and get these people out of here."
"God damn it, Dad, you'd better make it onto that fucking boat." They bashed in the zombies' skulls as they yelled at each other. I struggled to get down the dock, and Billy ran up behind me to help.
"I love you,"
said William to his boy. As Billy grabbed my arm and wrapped it over his shoulder, I saw that he was crying. At that moment I understood what was happening. William wasn't getting on the boat. "What's he doing?" I asked. Billy shook his head and growled when he answered.
"Trying to be a hero. The boat has to be running to move. It's too damn heavy to push away from the dock. We're sitting ducks if I can't get the engine started."
I looked back as we got onto the boat and saw William had positioned himself at the base of the dock. At the top of the hill, the fence shook as more zombies climbed through the hole left by the thug's truck. 5, 6, 7, then 10, then 15 zombies crawled through. William stood stoically, his rebar held high, ready to do everything he could to make sure his son survived. Billy ran to the cabin at the front of the boat and tried to get the engine to turn over. He yelled at the machine and kicked at it as he struggled to get it going. I tried to push the boat away from the dock, but I didn't have the strength. Laura ran over to help, but we couldn't get the vessel to budge.
"I told you,"
said Billy, as he watched from inside the boat's cabin.
"The boat's too damn heavy to push off without the motor going. That's why Dad's up there."
We looked up at William. He was losing the fight. The only question was how quick he would die. I considered trying to convince everyone to jump in the water and swim out into the bay, but my daughters couldn't swim, and my leg was too damaged to even try. Everything was happening so fast, and every useless churn of the boat's motor seemed to further convince me that we were doomed.
"Come on, you motherfucker,"
said Billy, as he slapped the steering wheel.
"I know you can start. Hurry up and start."
He glanced back over his shoulder at me.
"It'll start. I just need a minute to get it going." "We don't have a minute,"
Laura screamed out at Billy as her eyes filled with frightened tears. I felt the crushing weight of responsibility bear down on me. I saw William protecting his son, his family, and I knew what I had to do. Laura, Kim, and Annie stood in the center of the boat. I knelt down and pulled Annie close. Her tiny hands wrapped around my neck, and I ran my fingers through her curly red hair. Then I reached out for Kim, who sobbed in fear. I pulled her cheek next to mine and kissed her over and over. I promised everything would be okay. I stood up and reached out to hold Laura's hand. She was crying, as was I, and we gazed into each other's eyes. I ran my thumb over the wedding band on her finger and leaned in to kiss her. When I pulled away, she gave me a smile so sweet and perfect that it put the one she gave me on our wedding day to shame. "I've got this," I said to her.
"Dave, no,"
she said as I let go of her hand. She grabbed on tighter and tried to pull me to her side.
"There's got to be another way. Don't go."
I smiled at her and said, "Trust me." She finally let go, and I looked around for anything I could use to defend myself. There was an 8-inch fisherman's knife lying on the floor that the Williams must have used for killing fish that got trapped in their net. I grabbed it and stepped up, out of the boat, and back onto the dock. Billy looked over his shoulder and saw what I was doing. He understood and nodded his thanks my way. I pointed the knife in his direction and said, "Get them out of here." Kim then realized what was happening, and she screamed out for me, "Daddy, no!" I could hear William's gasps as the zombies tore at his flesh. I could hear him dying the way that Barry had died, the way I would die. "I love you," I said to all of them. I stumbled down the dock. My right leg had been crushed by the thug's truck, but I ignored it and continued on. My left arm had been broken by Billy's oar, but I slipped it out of the sling and dealt with the pain. My head was bleeding from when the boat had struck me in the Everland River, but I looked past the blood that ran into my eyes. I was all that stood between a horde of zombies and the 3 loves of my life. Pain no longer mattered. The first zombie nearly fell by himself as he ran along the slippery dock. All I had to do was push him to the side, and he fell into the murky bay to sink to the bottom. The second was stronger, but I slammed my shoulder into him before he caught me. I pushed him up and off his feet. I thrust him to my left, and he fell off the dock, but he managed to grab hold of the sling that dangled at my side. He pulled me down to my knees and tried to either pull himself up or pull me down with him. I chopped at his wrist, but he wouldn't let go, and I didn't have time to saw through bone. I ducked my head and wormed my way out of the sling, releasing the zombie to fall into the water and disappear beneath the waves to join his friend. The next one caught me in a compromised, bent position. It bit into my back, and I screamed out, not in pain, but in anger. I rose up with all the strength my legs could manage, and slid the blade up past my head, catching the zombie in the throat. The force of my strike, combined with my upward movement, caused the blade to all but sever the zombie's head. He went flying backward through the air and landed on the dock with his head flopped to the side. 2 more zombies were already there to replace him. I looked back to see if the boat had left. It was still pressed up against the dock. I had to buy them more time. I kicked the next zombie's knee and knocked it to the ground at my feet. It grabbed my leg, but I didn't have time to worry as the next zombie was already attacking. I swiped through the air as it reached out for me and caught it on the fingers, slicing off the tips. I felt the creature at my feet gnaw into the flesh of my calf. I cried out, but not in pain. I wouldn't let the girls hear my pain. I needed to focus on the one that was still standing, the one that could still threaten my family. It lunged at me, and I grabbed onto its neck. I twirled to the side as I fell, and tried to force it off the dock as it went with me. It worked, but when I fell, I was at the mercy of the zombie eating my leg. It lurched forward and pulled itself over me. I stabbed the knife down, but it deflected off the zombie's skull and into my leg. I growled with anger and pulled the blade back out to strike again. Another zombie tried to run past me toward the boat, but I dropped the knife and reached out to grab its leg. I pulled it down and back toward me. It turned, as if shocked I was there. It must not have realized a living person was right at hand, and it quickly turned its attention to me. I grabbed its head as it squirmed toward me. It seethed in starving anger, and I spit in its face. Then I screamed at it with every ounce of fury I could manage, as the zombie at my side bit into my waist. My voice was a battle cry that echoed over the water of Haley's Bay. No zombie on this dock would ever mistake me for dead and try to run past. No zombie would make it past me while I still drew a breath. I screamed so that my girls might live as the horde swept over me. The last sound I heard, over the growls of the zombies that were biting into me, was the motor of the Casper sputter to life. The last thing I saw before my world turned black was my family sail away to safety. The last thing I knew before I died was that I had won.
This has been an Audible Frontiers production of Deadlocked 1, written by A.R. Wise, narrated by Brian Sutherland. Producer, Mike Charzik. Copyright 2011 by Aaron Wise. Production copyright 2013 by Audible, Inc.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.